Welcome to day 2 of the Symposium for Innovations in International Philanthropy. For those of you who weren't able to join us yesterday, my name is Maggie Alexander, and I'm a senior partner at the Philanthropic Initiative. We're really excited to get right into today's program, but before doing so, we'd like to thank some really important folks.
My name is Ina Brewer. I'm the Executive Director of New England International Donors, and I'm the other co-host of the program. Let me begin by just thanking our sponsors, many of which who have been with us for the second time in a row. They include the Boston Foundation, Fidelity Charitable Trust, Deshpande Foundation, Vanguard Charitable, Veris Wealth Partners, Give to Asia, the King Baudouin Foundation, and also Lexington Wealth Advisors. We encourage all of you to check out their tab on the virtual platform.
That's great, Ina. And we'd also really like to give a shout out for our amazing advisory committee. They've been so helpful in giving us counsel on how to put together this virtual event. And they're also just been great support in getting the word out to their networks. Our first is the Wings. Second is Hispanics in Philanthropy and the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, Fidelity Charitable, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, the Boston Foundation, the African Philanthropy Forum, United Philanthropy Forum, Aspen Institute, and finally the National Center for Family Philanthropy. Thank you all so much. It really would not have been possible to have this event without you. So thanks so much. And it's now my great distinct pleasure to introduce Lee Pelton, the CEO and president of the Boston Foundation. Lee has the good pleasure of introducing an amazing keynote speaker, Theo Sowa. Theo is a fierce advocate for women, youth, equality, and shifting the power imbalance. So with no further ado, Lee and Theo, welcome.
Good afternoon, or morning, or evening, depending on where you are in this global audience. And thank you to Ina Brewer and Maggie Alexander for their kind introduction. I'm Lee Pelton, and this June I began my tenure as the president and CEO of the Boston Foundation. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to the Innovations in International Philanthropy Symposium. It may come as a surprise to many people that the Philanthropic Initiative and the Center for Global Philanthropy, which Maggie so brilliantly leads, are a part of what is by definition a local community foundation. But as we continue to experience a triple pandemic of COVID-19, racial injustice, and economic inequities felt in Boston and abroad, it is clearer than ever that there are few issues that can be defined as only local. One need look no further than the New England International Donors, which Ina started at the Boston Foundation and has taken to gloriously new heights. As philanthropists, our issues, our interests, our calling extends far beyond what we can see out of our windows. It's why we are all here today. We are not just citizens of a place, we are custodians of a planet and partners in its care. My colleagues at TBF have heard me repeat this a number of times. It's a quote from James Baldwin, who said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." If we are to face our problems head on with honesty and a critical eye, then geography and place soon fades. But sometimes geography is overtaken by other forces. The recent earthquake in Haiti, just as it did in 2010, impacted not only the residents of southwestern Haiti, but thousands of families and friends of Haitian ancestry living in the greater Boston area. As you heard yesterday, and you will hear more about this later today with Pierre Noël of the Haitian Development Institute, with whom the Boston Foundation has partnered with donors in establishing and supporting leaders with roots and stakes in Haiti to bring financial resources and capacity development to the region since 2010 earthquake, we are hopeful that this investment will expedite and bring permanence to the recovery. So just as events worldwide can touch us, there is power in philanthropy to affect change. And this is what our keynote speaker today has demonstrated in no uncertain terms. Theo Sowa is a true citizen of the world in every definition of that phrase. Born in Ghana, she lived as a child on 4 continents. She developed her very strong and focused voice based on her experiences in many countries. And through her early work in development and journalism, she gave voice to others, primarily to women and children at risk and with much need. She has advised or had leadership roles at a remarkable list of organizations, including the United Kingdom National Youth Agency, UNICEF, the Stephen Lewis Foundation, the United Nations Development Program, Comic Relief, which is an international grant-making and advocacy foundation, the British Refuge Council's Leadership Board, and the African Grant Makers Network. She not only was a senior program advisor on the UN study on children in armed conflict, known as the Michel Report, she helped develop policy and led negotiations among relevant UN agencies, governments, and NGOs involved across 5 continents. In turn, President Nelson Mandela and his wife, Rasa Michel, appointed her an advisor to the global movement for children. And most recently, she served as the CEO of the African Women's Development Fund, and today is co-chair of the Equality Fund. When the symposium co-host, Maggie Alexander, reached out, Theo Sowa told Maggie she was on what I would describe as a well-deserved sabbatical. She was taking time to step back, to listen, to think, and to assess. She asked Maggie, why are you doing this? What are you hoping to achieve? What are the values of this event? All of these were great questions. And it seems that Maggie had the right answers when she said that the purpose of our convening was to empower donors to move confidently from words and thought to action that creates real and powerful change. So today I have the distinct honor to introduce Theo Sowa to you now. And as I said when I first came to the Boston Foundation 3 months ago, our own organization needs to take action to reimagine what we do and what we can do and how we do it, with some key questions in mind. How can we lift up the voices of those in our communities? How do we swing open wide the doors of opportunity, especially for those who don't have a seat at the table of bounty? And how do we shape a shared, powerful vision of our common humanity, of what we can be, and then move everyone involved at every level from vision to action? And so now, happily, it's our turn to step back, to listen, to think, and to learn. I am so honored to welcome our speaker today, who has given such powerful agency to women and children around the globe. And I'm happy that she is with us today to discuss the role of philanthropy in realigning power dynamics in today's keynote address.
Thank you, Lee, for that lovely introduction. And thanks to all of you who are here and part of this symposium today. I'm delighted to join you. And I was so excited when I heard the title of the remarks that you were hoping that I would make, or the discussion that we might have together. I really believe in the role of philanthropy in fueling social action, in fueling justice, in fueling all types of equality. But I also am very aware of the role of philanthropy in undermining many of those things which philanthropists themselves would feel that they are striving to achieve. I think these comments about a shared, powerful vision of what we can be is incredibly important in our looking at this journey of philanthropy, social activism, equality, and communal progress. Because without that shared, without that powerful vision of what we can be, we can end up on very different journeys, thinking that we are working towards the same ends. And so I wanted to start with looking at that word shared, looking at how we get to a shared vision. Lee was talking about stepping back and listening. And what I would like to encourage all of you who are here today or this evening, what I would like to encourage, what I would like to challenge you to do is to think about the way in which you listen, and therefore the way in which you share a vision with other people. Listening is an incredibly powerful tool. And if we only listen to people who look like ourselves or who have the same experiences as ourselves, if we don't listen to people who are most affected by the social, the economic, the political issues that we want to see changed, then we actually undermine our ability to achieve the very things that we became involved in philanthropy in the hope of achieving. So I want to tell you a story about listening and why I think it's so important, and why it's so important for philanthropists to learn to listen, not just to their inner circle, not just to a small group of advisors, but to the people who actually are at the front lines of working on the issues that we want to see changed. The wonderful and truly inspirational Lima Bowie, the Liberian Nobel Peace Prize winner, told me this story once. As a Nobel Peace Prize winner, she's worked very hard to open doors and to make sure that philanthropists and activists and media actually are listening to women in particular who are working in areas of conflict and working and looking at building peace. As part of those efforts, she actually took a group of media, a group of journalists, and a few philanthropists to the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. This was a while ago. And she got together a group of women to come and speak to journalists and speak to philanthropists about their experiences, and therefore what they were hoping that they could work collectively in partnership on developing in their communities. And Lima said it was really hard work, because when they started listening, the first woman came along and she spoke of the horror of the conflict that she'd survived. She spoke of horrendous violence to herself and to her children and to her community. Lima said the story was almost impossible to listen to and caused her incredible pain. But then towards the end of her comments, the woman said, and then the women came and they listened to me and they helped me recover from the violence that I had suffered. And they helped me regather my family together, and they helped me look at how I could move forward. And then the next woman came and spoke to the group. And she also had a horrible tale of anguish and suffering and violence. And she also said, and then the women came And they helped me understand that I was more than the violence that I had experienced. And they worked with me to get food back on the table for my family. And they worked with me to find ways of farming so that we could feed ourselves as we went forward. And she said, woman after woman after woman came forward. The same pattern emerged. Every single woman talked about the sisterhood that had helped her recover and the sisterhood that had helped her look forward and start looking at building. And so then they opened the floor to questions. And the first journalist got up and said, so can you tell us how many times you were raped? And then the second journalist got up and said, so you said that the whole of your village was burnt down and nothing survived. And then the third journalist got up and asked a very similar question. And even the philanthropists in the audience were standing up and saying, so how do we find the victims of this violence to know who to fund? And after a few questions, Lima just stopped everyone and said, what did you hear? What were you listening to that these are the questions that you're asking? Because while they were asking questions that pointed to victimhood, what Lima had heard were stories that pointed to sisterhood. What she had heard were opportunities for resourcing women to support each other. What she heard was woman after woman after woman coming and saying, and then the women came and helped me recover and helped me build and helped me look forward, and we worked together. Now, I tell that story because how we listen and what we hear is so important. Those journalists, those philanthropists, those people who were listening to the women in the DRC had gone into that room with preconceptions of the women as victims. And as a result, everything the women said ended up being added to that victimhood. Lima went in understanding from her own experience and other women who've survived conflict situations that actually it is not about victimhood, it's about survival and change and moving forward. And so what she was listening for were the keys, the information, the hints, the actual requests from the women around how to resource recovery, how to resource collective action, how to resource economic change that would lead to sustainable lives, independence, autonomy, and that is what would counter the violence that those communities and those women had lived through. If as a philanthropist, you are hearing victimhood as opposed to opportunity, leadership, and sustainability, your giving is very likely to undermine the very things that you are working or living or being in philanthropy for. And that's why I say listening openly, listening beyond your comfort levels, listening to people that you often do not know or have not spoken to before, but who you can work with through intermediaries, really listening, and on the basis of that hearing, working with that expanded group to shape your actions in philanthropy. To shift power in philanthropy, we need to shift our mindsets. And that means recognizing our privileges, recognizing our preconceptions, recognizing our limitations, but more importantly, recognizing other people's expertise, recognizing that you do not have to have been to an Ivy League school to actually have expertise. on peace building or conflict resolution or economic justice, and that indeed the very fact of living injustice, living through inequality, coming out the other side of discrimination gives you an expertise that you will never learn in an ivory tower. So it is important to be able to really reach beyond the boxes that people are constantly trying to put us into. And in recognizing our privilege, but as I said, more importantly, recognizing the expertise, the differing expertise, the differing experience, the lived experience of others, you open up that circle of advice. You open up the voices that you hear. You open up the opportunities that are available to really seed the social change, the economic justice, the economic security that so many of us really want to see happen through our philanthropy. Money is extremely powerful. And so if we are shifting power in philanthropy, it's not just using money to shift power externally and in individual initiatives, it's also questioning ourselves and looking at how we shift the ways in which we give, because how we give matters. Another quick story. Many years ago, when HIV/AIDS was ravaging East Africa, I had the privilege of working with many support groups that had been established by women living with HIV/AIDS to support themselves in order that they had emotional support, social support to help them deal with the stigma that had come with HIV/AIDS, but also to give themselves support and encouragement as they started taking antiretroviral treatments and looking at where that would hopefully reinvigorate their lives. There were a few groups of philanthropists, but also of private sector bankers, but also of some governments who had seen microcredit as an idea work in other parts of the world. And they decided that microcredit was what was going to make a difference to women in this East African country. So they gathered money, they came along, and they had worked out that giving to groups rather than individuals worked better in terms of getting repayments on the microcredit loans. They'd also worked out that groups of women actually were more reliable in repaying